Hello and welcome back to another of these tier list videos, and this time it's the Colin Baker era. Now, I want to preface this. I really like Colin Baker as the Doctor. I just don't like the stories in his era. He's been done very well on Big Finish. I actually enjoy him as the Doctor. I think he's brilliant. I think he's fantastic. He's theatrical. He commands the screen all the time that he's on it. But I do not enjoy his era, and I've not got a lot of overly nice things to say about it. So if that's going to really hack you off, if you're one of these people who are like, season 22 is one of the greatest seasons of all time, you might want to turn off now, because I'm really not going to be overly nice about this. Not all of it's bad. In fact, I would say less than half of it is going to be in the bottom two tiers. But I don't think anything is going to make it into those top two columns either. A lot of it's just good or okay. Twin Dilemma. Why am I? Oh, I cannot believe that they followed up Caves of Androzani with this. I cannot believe. This is the worst possible decision I think a showrunner has ever made. The idea of trying to make a Doctor deliberately unlikable in their opening appearance is the counter opposite of what the whole point of that first episode is. Everyone, if you're writing a Doctor's first story, you have the most difficult job of all, because first impressions really count, and you've got to try and sell the Doctor. Think of Stephen Moffat's often talked about the 11th hour and how difficult that was as a script to write, because of all the things you've got to balance. But trying to make a Doctor likable and sell them as the Doctor in the first appearance is important. And they deliberately made him unlikable, and he had to fight. Colin Baker had to fight against what this episode made him for his entire era, because he strangles Perry, he's cowardly, he's genuinely dislikable, even though his performance is good. The costume, all the behind the scenes decisions on this one, I cannot bring myself to imagine what was going through the producers' heads when they thought this stuff was a good idea. Colin Baker should have been theatrical, he should have been sarcastic, but he shouldn't have been an absolute jerk, which is what this script was trying to make him. And I think that, honestly, is the most irresponsibly written lines in all of Classic Who is, I am the Doctor, whether you like it or not. Because by the end of the story, we should be rooting for him. But they're trying to deliberately make us not like him so he can build as a character arc, which I understand. But it's just a very, very bad way to go about writing a Doctor. Colin Baker's good, Nicola Bryant's good, but the plot is rubbish. Those twins cannot act. I don't like saying that because I don't like common people's acting, but they really can't. And just like Frontios, we're with slugs again, and the slugs have an evil plan, and I'm bored. Why? Why would you not finish season 21 on Caves of Androzani? Why would you go out with this? From one of the greatest, probably my top 3 or 4 greatest Classic Who stories of all time, to something that's easily in my bottom 3 or 4 Classic Who stories of all time. And yet, this is not the worst Colin Baker story, because I'll get to that. Attack of the Cybermen is okay. It's got a lot of fans. It looks great, but it suffers from those season 22 problems that I've talked about on a couple of occasions. Tonal whiplash in this episode. It is one of the darkest pieces of Doctor Who ever. It's also incredibly silly, and the two tones, they cannot reconcile them into one particular mood and thing. This is the story that includes Lytton getting his hand crushed and blood running down there. Quite brutal body horror in Cybermen conversion. It also contains these weird, silly fairy people who talk in high-pitched voices, and it's way too continuity heavy. Even me, who, as a massive Doctor Who fan, was sort of going, okay, Mondas 983, okay, we're harking back to that story, we're also harking back to Tomb of the Cybermen, we're also harking back to... There's a lot of pre-existing lore that you have to know what the flip's going on in this story. And that really detracts from it. I think Colin Baker is much better. I like Lytton's redemption. All that stuff is keeping it up, but it is tonal whiplash. And much like every story in season 22, there's the two tones that don't work together, and there is bad pacing problems. This is not a necessarily overly aggressive version of that, because I actually think the Doctor and Perry get into the plot at a slightly reasonable point, unlike in Revelation of the Daleks, for instance, where it takes them 45 minutes to enter the plot. So I enjoy, to a certain extent, Attack on Cybermen. It looks immense. The stuff on Telos looks incredible, and there are some nice moments, and I like some of the stuff in London Underground. But it suffers from a very two contradictory tones that it can't really reconcile into one discernible thing. Vengeance on Varos. Good. I really like Vengeance on Varos. It's a very good plot. I love Syl. I think there's a lot of good stuff going on. Again, I don't know, something about it doesn't... I mean, maybe it could go in great. Maybe I'm being overly harsh, and maybe on a rewatch, I will change my mind and think it's great. But I don't have it as high as a lot of people do. I think it's good. It's got some good things to say about reality television and about democracy. It's definitely a very heavily politically charged story, but something still feels off, possibly in the pacing, or maybe still in the tone. Season 22 just suffered from those two problems consistently, in my book, as well as some very weird writing. The Mark of the Rani. I don't like the Rani. Everyone always talks about how classic Who villains need to come back. The Rani is the one they always talk about. Of all the Time Lords, you know, there's the War Chief, there's Omega, there's Morbius. She is the last one that I want to see, because she's in two very bad stories and she's not even particularly good in them. And Kate O'Mara gives a good performance, but it doesn't help that she's deliberately detrimental to the Master. You know, the Master's in this story to just tell her how clever she is and to look like she's a very much superior version of the Master, because she was only brought in because the Master had lost all credibility over the 3 Davison series. Ainley's wasted. I don't think there's a very good plot. There's some interesting stuff going on. There is an awful cliffhanger with the Doctor on the carriage about to go down into the pit. There's some really just genuinely, why did you do that stuff? Like people standing on landmines and getting turned into trees. And like, who thought of this? Again, tonal whiplash, left, right, and centre, poor pacing, not a good villain. I don't warm to this story whatsoever. And again, like a lot of season 22 stories, it started out okay, and then as it got going, I was like, yeah, this is just veering off completely, and it really does. And it doesn't help that this villain is deliberately damaging to the Master, to our perception of the Master. This whole video is just going to be me complaining, isn't it? Because the worst Colin Baker story, and if it wasn't for the Invasion of Time, I would say the worst classic Who story of all time. Doctor Who deserved to be cancelled after this, and it did get cancelled, and I hate that it got cancelled, but it sort of deserved it. If I'd watched the 2 Doctors, I would have agreed, because, oh my life, I was losing brain cells watching this. I cannot believe they brought Patrick Troughton back for that. They brought Fraser Hines back for that. Episode 1 is good. There's the Sontarans. Jamie and 2 are great when they're actually on screen. Episode 2 totally veers off into pointless monotony. And episode 3 is the most painful thing I have ever watched. 3 45-minute parts basically makes this the last 6-parter of Classic Who. It's long, it's stretched. The Sontarans are treated as an absolute joke when being written by Robert Holmes, their original writer. It's infuriating, and they're switched out for these creatures who it has a very weird message about. These creatures who are humanoids, but they're too savage to be given genuine power or ideas. I'm not sure what that's trying to say, but I kind of hate it. And with just constant vegetarian metaphors, left, right. It's not even a metaphor. Shockeye literally turns to the screen at one point and it's like, do you know how that they kill animals in this country? No. And honestly, I feel less likely to be a vegetarian just to spite them for making this episode. I wanted to just go eat a bacon sandwich when I was finished, just to get back at them. That's what you get for ruining Patrick Troughton and Fraser Hines' return. I was infuriated by this. Tonal whiplash. This has this guy getting stabbed in the chest. And then it has these weird, goofy villains where have got like, what have they got? Like sparkles on their cheeks or something? The Sontaran design is a joke. They are switched out for the Androgams. That's the name, Androgams, who are awful. Why would you bring back Patrick Troughton? Not even let him play the Doctor. Make him play this weird Androgan character. Why would you bring back Fraser Hines with Patrick Troughton and not have the two of them interact enough on screen? Why would you have a multi-Doctor story with Colin Baker and Patrick Troughton hardly interacting whatsoever? Why would you have a plot set in Spain when it didn't even require to be set in Spain? And why then would you not let the Doctor and Perry enter the actual plot for an hour and a half? I cannot get over how bad this is. This is... I just want to talk about something else. I just want to talk about something else. Timelash. Timelash, maybe because it followed up the two Doctors, I didn't find as bad as its reputation suggested. It's still bad. It's objectively bad. The actual plot is dull, but literally the sight of a girl opening her locket and there being a picture of Katie Manning in there was enough to re-grab my interest and make me cheer. The sight of their graffiti being a picture of John Pertwee was enough to make me cheer. Season 22 could be too continuity heavy at times, but I was flipping happy to see Katie Manning and John Pertwee, just even in those tiny little glimmers. And I think the Borat's an okay villain, and as much as everyone likes to hate on the production, and rightly so on the basis of that weird as hell sequence in the, like in basically what's in a foam pit when they're dangling down. I think this is an okay one. Actually, I don't think it's okay. I think it's objectively bad, but I don't mind watching it. I'll put it above Mark of the Rani, actually. It's a very generic plot, actually. So it's not the worst thing in the world. This is not the story that the reputation suggests. It's nowhere near as bad as its reputation, because it's nowhere near as bad as the two Doctors. Why would anyone like that? I'm still going on about it. Revelation of the Daleks. Okay, could push into good, but pacing issues are still abound. They moved to the 2 45-minute slot format for season 22, but they never adapted the way that they wrote episodes. So they still paced episode 1 like it was episode 1 of a 4-part story. So we have 45 minutes of the Doctor and Perry before they actually reach the plot. And there's a lot of weird stuff. There's the DJ. There's a lot of stuff that's keeping this from being the classic that it should be. The pacing, some of the weird tone, and a lot of the stuff that's going on that just has no bearing on the actual plot, like Davros trying to get this woman to stab Clive Swift. Leave Clive Swift alone. He's a flipping legend. I love that man. But when it's good, it's so good. Like the horror in this episode is brilliant. And the ideas in the horror in this episode are just great. And I feel like this is another example of a story that should have been a classic, but they just mishandled certain aspects. And as a result, I can't enjoy it the way I should be able to. And I think that's a lot of the Colin Baker era for me. There's good ideas. I can see the ideas there. But it's hampered so much by some just poor decision-making work. I think this is a good plot. I think it's a very interesting plot. I like the body horror. I love the scene of the guy begging his daughter to kill him as he's a mutated Dalek. Oh, that is beautifully demented. I've talked about the tone. I don't have an issue with Doctor Who being darker and more violent and more, more bloody, if that's what you want, apart from the bit of the two Doctors where he gets stabbed because that's played for laughs. But I don't have an issue with it being darker, more bloody, any of those things. It just the tone has to feel consistent, and having all this dark stuff in this story with that campy DJ and things like that mean the tone doesn't. So between the pace, again, another season 22 story where I've got the same things to say. Could be good, but the pace is off and the tone's off. But actually, I think I found this an enjoyable story to watch. I could put it in good, actually. Part 2 would qualify for good. Part 2 is very good. Part 1's too slow. The Mysterious Planet. Okay. I quite like this one because one real reason. Sabalon Glitz is the best Sixth Doctor companion. He's not actually a companion yet, but he's great in this with his pal. I can't remember what his pal's name is. He's just a very fun character. There's an interesting plot. It's actually very Crotons, the plot, but it's more colourful than the Crotons and a bit more fun. It's Robert Holmes' script. There's a lot of nice wit, and the seeds of the actual trial of a Time Lord are set. There's a lot of very good courtroom sequences, even though every cliffhanger is just the Doctor's face and it zooms in dramatically. I should get a zoom for this thing, like Elton from Love and Monsters. But I did enjoy this one. Yes, it looks a bit daft. Yes, the production's a bit off. And yes, it's still not perfect. But season 23 is such an improvement on season 22. It's not brilliant by any stretch, but it's just a far more consistent piece of television, in my opinion. Mindwarp is the exception to Trial of a Time Lord's success because I think it's easily the weakest story, out of character Doctor, weird twist. But Peri's death is sublime, and I hate that they retconned it later. So good. Such a good ending. And I talked about this in the Davison video, how often they planned to kill off companions and then chickened out. This isn't it. They actually killed off the companion and then chickened out later, just so the Doctor didn't have to feel sad about it and could just move on with Nell while he leaves Peri to be married to this idiot played by Brian Blessed. It's big, it's camp, and it's saved by the one and only Syl, who is phenomenally good. He's such a great character. And his creepy little laugh. He's so good. But he's what's saving it from being terrible. And I enjoy the actual trial sequences. I always enjoy the trial sequences between Michael Grayson's Valeyard and the Doctor, and they're so good over the theatrics of that big courtroom drama. And Mindwarp is the exception to this season's success, but I don't mind it. I think it's okay. I think it's bad, but I don't mind the story as much as the Twin Dilemma. And I think talking about okay, I'll put Terror of the Vervoids in okay, but Attack of the Cybermen, yeah, I think so. I quite enjoy this one. I think Mel gets a very decent beginning. There's some nice elements at play all throughout the story. The Doctor commits genocide, and that becomes a big cliffhanger because that's a crime against Time Lords, and it's never resolved. Why? Not why genocide's a crime, because I mean that's obvious, but it never gets resolved. And why doesn't it? Why at the end of The Ultimate Foe they're just like, okay, Doctor, well it transpired that you're not going to do that, and it makes no sense. We're going to look into the Doctor's future, and he's with this companion called Mel. But at the end of The Ultimate Foe, he takes Mel with him. So where did they meet? Is no one else confused by that? Timey-wimey shenanigans, I suppose. The Ultimate Foe should be great, but the ending just pushes it down to good. I love this story. Easily my favourite Colin Baker story. I was enchanted. I watched the first 10 minutes of the first episode, and I went back and watched it again when I was watching it. I rewound the whole thing and watched it, because it was so good. The courtroom scenes are explosive with all those revelations about who the Valeyard is, the Master turning up, Mel and Sabalon Glitz's testimonies, the Doctor. That is the best 10 minutes of 80s Who. When we go into The Matrix, things get a little bit creepy, but we've got Geoffrey Hughes, and he's great. And Michael Grayson is decent, and we have The Matrix used to its full, wacky, weird potential, which I really enjoy. The only reason this is not in great is that some of the actual final plot threads of the Trial of a Time Lord season don't come together as well as they should. I thought that the Valeyard was doing it all to get all loads of the Doctor's remaining lives, which was a motivation that made sense. But then he tries to blow some stuff up, and it seems like that was his plan all along. And I'm just like, what? And I honestly can't get my head around the ending. I like the fact that he's still alive. That ending when he turns around and he's still living, but of course that we've never come back to that. So Lord knows what's going on with that now. And I don't like the retconning of Peri's death. I think Peri's death was great, and they shouldn't have gone back on themselves when they'd killed a character in such a impactful way. They shouldn't have gone back on that. Just my opinions, though, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to incredibly disagree with the negative aspect of this video. But as I said, I enjoy Colin Baker. I don't necessarily enjoy his companions. Well, I enjoy them on their own, but I don't necessarily enjoy them with him. But I really like Colin Baker. I just don't like a lot of the things in his era. And yet, when he left, I missed him. And, you know, I knew when I watched the end of the On the Floor, I was like, it's a shame that he never really got a chance to make this character his own. And I'm really glad that Big Finish has given him those opportunities. So feel free to tell me in the comments down below. And also tell me what Big Finish Sixth Doctor stuff I should listen to, because I've only listened to a tiny bit. But I would quite like to, because he was very good in what I've heard. And that's the common refrain about Colin Baker. Yes, his TV stuff may not be very good, but you should listen to him on audio, and I very much intend to. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all the usual stuff he said at the end of these videos. See you for McCoy.